The public was on high alert when men from the same county in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, began to go missing. 4 men were reported missing within a week, and they were being called the Lost Boys of Bucks County. During the investigation, it was found that these boys may have known each other, and they also may have known their killer. This is a crazy case, and the way it unfolds is like the plot of a movie. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I am Brooke Mckenna, and I really appreciate that you are here. If you enjoy these type of videos, I post every single Sunday and would love if you would subscribe and leave a nice comment. And if you never want to miss an upload, you can sign up for the Genuine Gem newsletter. All you have to do is put in your email, and I will personally send you my videos every single week so you never miss an upload. But first, a quick moment for our sponsor, Raycon. Raycon has the best everyday earbuds for whether you're working, you're at the gym, you're walking, you're just listening to a podcast as you're cleaning around the house. It's literally for everything, which is why I keep them in my purse 24/7. They have active noise canceling for when you just want to drown out the world, plus 8 hours of playtime, plus 32 hours of battery life in the charging case. Raycon earbuds also have a multi-point connection feature to connect to 2 devices at once. But my favorite part is the awareness mode, which allows me to wear them while also being able to hear what's going on around me. I've talked about it before, but as women, we need to be able to hear our surroundings for our safety, and this allows you to do so while still being able to listen to things and be a normal human being. So you'll catch me wearing Raycon all the time for every little thing, and it's always going to be in my purse. So if you want, you can get 15% off at buyraycon.com/Brooke Mckenna, or use the QR code on the screen for 15% off the new everyday earbuds. Now let's get back to the story. So on Wednesday, July 5th of 2017, Jimmy Taro Patrick would vanish. Jimmy was a sophomore in his college at La Toya University, Maryland, majoring in business. Jimmy had been raised by his grandparents due to his mother suffering from schizophrenia and being unable to take care of him. So his grandparents raised him since he was about a day old, as if he was their son. Jimmy did wonderfully in school. He even received a full ride scholarship. He was said to love his parents and was quite a responsible young man. Jimmy was said to be one of those guys who was so outgoing with so much energy, but he was also a very smart kid who cared about everyone. A former high school teacher of Jimmy said that he loved the adventure of living so much that not even death could keep him down. Unfortunately, that was a premonition of what was to come. By this point, Jimmy was living in Newtown, Pennsylvania. He was last seen around 6 p.m. on the 5th, leaving his grandfather's home. He had told his grandmother he wouldn't be home too late. He was going to meet some friends at Chick-fil-A, and then he would be back. And he was known to be very responsible. He never really lied about where he was going. He was also an adult at this point, so it's not like he was under any sort of curfew. But if Jimmy would ever to come home late at night, he would always go into his grandparents' room. He would wake them up and let them know he was home. This just showed how close he was with them and how much he cared about their trust. But that night, he didn't do so. He failed to show up for work the next morning at the Candlewick restaurant for his shift. And when his grandparents started talking to his friends about that last night at Chick-fil-A, how that went, his friends confirmed that they had never gotten together. They hadn't seen him at all that night. The Patricks then checked their surveillance cameras, and they saw Jimmy right before he was leaving, and he was throwing something away in their trash can in the garage. However, he hadn't taken his car after that. It was still in the driveway. He had gotten a ride from someone. Jimmy would be reported missing to the Newtown Township Police on the 6th after friends and family could not get a hold of him. Police were able to track down his phone, saying that it last pinned at a park in Delaware County, the county over from where they lived in Bucks. His father headed to that location and could not find anything. They didn't believe that the Newtown police were doing enough, and they ended up hiring a private investigator. This private investigator would reveal to them that another boy was also missing in the same area where Jimmy was from. Bucks County. While the search for Jimmy was fruitless, another man had vanished 2 days later. It was around 6:30 at night when another man went missing. This was 19-year-old Dean Finocchiaro of Middletown. He had been last seen on July 7th around 6:30 p.m., picked up by an unidentified person. He had not been seen since. Dean and his dad had gone to a local sushi restaurant that Friday night together, but when they got back home, Dean said that he was headed out. He would be gone for about 15 minutes and he would be back. So, of course, as a 19-year-old, his dad didn't press him on who he was going with because Dean just said it was a neighborhood kid. But he never came home that night, and soon enough, his phone was going straight to voicemail. Dean was working as a cook for Richmond's Ice Cream and Burger Co. and didn't show up for his shift that night, and that is when he was officially reported missing to the Middletown Township Police. He was said to love fishing and extreme sports. He was said to be a loyal friend with a huge heart. He was a fearless daredevil. His friends said some of us just cruise through life, but that was not Dean. His father said that Dean told his parents everything, even if they didn't want to know. Even if he was going to do something bad, he would still tell them. So it didn't make any sense that he would keep a secret from them that night. He had also just landed this job as a cook, and he was on an upward trajectory in his life at this point. But the Middletown police knew of Dean due to his motorcycle joyriding in the town that often got him in trouble. The detective who was sent to make this missing persons report actually said that they knew Dean from all of these incidents, and Dean's parents were really worried that that would cause this not to be taken seriously. They were trying to tell the detective that Dean had been turning his life around with his job as a cook. He was working more than anything these days. But his parents had a gut feeling that something was different this time. He was not just being this rebellious teen. None of his friends knew where he was or had seen him. His parents went on social media and began to go through his friends list, reaching out to everybody to see if they knew anything. They dwindled down the list with nobody being able to say that they were with him that night, and that is when they were left with one name on his friends: Cosmo Dinardo. A friend that other friend said Dean had met through riding ATVs. They hadn't been close, but Cosmo was also described as not being right in the head. His parents had never heard of this Cosmo. Cosmo was found to be a 20-year-old living with his family in Sturgis Township, Pennsylvania. That's all they really knew about him at that point, and there was nothing connecting him to this disappearance. But the private investigator working Jimmy's case believed that Dean's case and Jimmy's case could be connected as they were both around the same age. They graduated in 2016. They didn't live too far from one another in Bucks County. However, Jimmy's parents had never heard of Dean. The boys had gone to two different schools, and they appeared to be in two completely different friends groups with no overlapping. So at this point, this was two entirely separate investigations, and Middletown detective Megan Freer had Dean's cell phone tracked, and that was last pinged to be found at a farm in New Hope Township in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. So this Detective Freer and also the Solebury detective, Detective Forrester, went there, and they described the location as eerie. They arrived at night. The property had no entry markers on the Lower York Road. There was a broken mailbox with fading numbers in the driveway, and they were searching for possibly a party with a few guys hanging out there, but they found it completely abandoned. It appears as though no one actually lived on this property, and the actual buildings appeared to be dilapidated. Solebury Detective Forrester went back to the abandoned property after they had first searched it that night. He walked up to the shed and he peeked in, and that's when he would see a vehicle inside. This was a nice, clean-looking car that appeared to have just been placed there. There was no dust or anything that had settled on top. Fresh tire tracks were also seen heading into the shed, and inside of the vehicle was an insulin pump for someone with diabetes. No one was inside. So Detective Forrester sent the license plate of this car to the police department, and it was identified as belonging to a man named Thomas Mayo. The Solebury Police Department were quickly informed that the man that they had just identified as the owner of this car was also a missing man. 3 men had been missing within a week. Now, Detective Freer found that the owners of this property had multiple properties in the area, so they went to the other address where the family resided to speak to their son. You see, he was around the same age as these missing boys, so they wondered if possibly he knew them. However, when they arrived there, his mother told them that he was not there and she was not sure when he would return. So while waiting to question this man, yet another man was found to be missing. Thomas Mayo's best friend, Mark Sturgis. You see, 22-year-old Mark Sturgis and 21-year-old Thomas Mayo met up on Friday, July 7th around 6 p.m. This was 30 minutes prior to Dean's disappearance. Thomas and Mark were said to be best friends. They worked at Mark's father's construction company together, and they had known each other for years. That night, Mark had told his father that he was going out to meet Thomas, and so he left his Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania home. But he was never seen again, and neither was his friend from Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Calls and texts to their phone went unanswered, and neither showed up to work the next day or days to come. Mark was said to be this loving man with unwavering loyalty to his friends and family with a giant heart. He had a nickname of Alpaca and was known to be a good brother, a good son, and a good worker. He wasn't one to just miss days. He had actually texted his girlfriend the day he vanished saying that he was going to work and that he loved her. But then he just stopped answering her, which his girlfriend knew was kind of normal for him. So in this case, she knew that Mark was very bad at charging his phone. He was not one that was connected to it. He would go days without actually having his phone on. So she didn't think this was odd, and she didn't believe that this meant he was missing. However, Mark's longtime friend Thomas Mayo was one that was always on his phone and would always be answering. Thomas was one that was never ashamed to be himself. He would always go by his word. Thomas was described as a ray of sunshine, one that can never and will never be put out. His girlfriend said he was thoughtful, he was patient, he was understanding, and that he wanted nothing more than for those that he loved to be happy. His girlfriend said that the day that he vanished, she had actually stopped at the gas station where he worked, and they had a conversation where Thomas was basically telling her that money didn't make him happy, that his friends and family do. And around 6:53 p.m., Thomas's girlfriend received her last text from him. She said it was out of the ordinary not to get in contact with him. So when they were not at work on Saturday, July 8th, Thomas's mother reported them missing to Plumstead Township Police. She knew that her son, as well as his friend Mark, had not reported to work, and also the fact that her son Thomas was diabetic and depended on insulin. He carried it with him everywhere as he needed it to survive daily. And that's when investigators remember the insulin left in that abandoned car that he allegedly was the owner of. So the next day, on Sunday, July 9th, Mark's family also reported him missing to the Pennsylvania State Police. Little did Mark and Thomas's parents know that one of their son's friends would actually lead investigators to a location of a possible crime scene. You see, Dean Finocchiaro happened to be friends with Thomas and Mark as well. Jimmy was the only one of the four not connected at this point, and Dean's cell phone had been tracked to this farm in the same county where all four boys had vanished from. Now, although Dean was believed to have vanished alone, and each of these four men were reported missing to different police departments, they were believed to be connected due to the friendship of Dean, Thomas, and Mark. By Monday, July 10th, the Bucks County DA, Mark Wintraub, told the media that he believed foul play was involved in the disappearances of these men, and information had begun to surface that all four men were connected. So a search warrant was executed at this farm, and it was found to be a 90-acre farm with a dilapidated home and shed on the property. Detectives found that along with this unlocked vehicle in the shed, there was also the title of the vehicle as well as keys up against the wall. There appeared to be no struggle outside of the car or outside of the shed.
It's 90-some acres, and we're going through it with the equivalent of a fine-tooth comb. I have hope. I think that it's very important to hang on to hope until there is no room left for it.
An arrest was also made around this time with a name previously mentioned in this case, but not for anything to do with the disappearance or even murder. A 20-year-old man named Cosmo Dinardo was arrested for illegally possessing a shotgun. His bail was set at $1 million. And that's when it came out that this 90-acre farm they were searching belonged to the Dinardo family, specifically Cosmo Dinardo's parents. Antonio and Sandro Dinardo had purchased these properties between 2005 and 2008 for a combined $6.5 million. They were extremely wealthy. Their son Cosmo lived a very wealthy upper-class life. He had some police run-ins due to his aggressiveness, but this did not often lead to arrest. He had, however, been admitted to a mental health facility back in February of 2017, so only a few months prior. This was involuntary inpatient treatment as he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. But at this time, he had been found in possession of a 20-gauge shotgun, and this was illegal due to the treatment he had previously received. When looking into who Cosmo Dinardo was, it was found that his online profiles were filled with angry posts with threats. Those friends who knew him offline and on were disturbed by his personality. No one was really willing to say they were Cosmo's friend. Investigators interviewed a friend of Cosmo who wasn't identified, and this friend told them that Cosmo had called him on Saturday, July 8th, trying to sell him something. Now, due to this, Cosmo was named a person of interest in the disappearance of the Bucks County Lost Boys. He was found to have gone to school with Jimmy Patrick and was 1 year behind him. It was a small school, so they actually knew each other, and that was Jimmy's connection to this case, to the possible killer, not the other victims. They were also friends on Facebook as well. But the public would slowly learn that all of these men had a way to connect to Cosmo Dinardo at the time. Surveillance cameras of Dean's neighbors actually captured Cosmo Dinardo's vehicle leaving the neighborhood around the same time Dean was picked up and vanished. License plate readers found that Cosmo's truck was also in the area where Thomas and Mark were last seen, and then at the farm. Now, the day that Cosmo was arrested was the same day he would make bail, with his family paying 10% of the $1 million in cash, and he was let go. There was still not enough evidence he had anything to do with the disappearances, and his own father bailed him out while the property they owned was being dug up for bodies. Cosmo told investigators that he was with Dean that Friday going to a house in Longhorn, Pennsylvania. He said that they got into an argument. He kicked Dean out of his truck, leaving him on the side of the road. Cosmo said he then went fishing in a local park around 9 p.m. and didn't know where Dean had gone. This was not a solid alibi, but there was also no solid evidence against him at this time. There was also a Snapchat group called Tom Where You At for the Missing Boys. Cosmo was said to be in that group chat, and when he was asked if he was worried about his buddy Dean, he stated that Dean probably just jumped parole or probation, that he had gotten in trouble, and he also was writing that a bunch of people had gone onto his property and that the cops were going there to arrest them for trespassing. There was also a photo of Cosmo going around where he was holding up a revolver to the camera. So the FBI, the Pennsylvania State Police, and 5 local law enforcement agencies searched the 90-acre farm using cadaver dogs, a backhoe, and other construction equipment. They were looking for any little piece of evidence, and when they searched the abandoned barn, they did find blood that was consistent with a large injury. However, there was no bodies. The 4 boys' families were actually allowed to be there, but they were kept in a small section at the farm while investigators searched. A search was also said to be conducted at the Dinardo's family residence where they lived. July 12th, a week after the disappearances, it was revealed that the investigators had not yet recovered any human remains. However, they did find evidence. And Cosmo was rearrested that day, accused of stealing and trying to sell a car. But this car belonged to Thomas Mayo, one of the missing men. This was Thomas's 1996 Nissan Maxima, and that friend that investigators had interviewed back on July 8th had told them he had met up with Cosmo, who was offering to sell him this car for $500. So Cosmo was charged with 1 count of theft by unlawful taking and 1 count receiving stolen property. property. The judge then ordered his bail to be $5 million cash, stating that he was a grave risk. His attorney, Fernando Perry Jr., a high-powered attorney who represented several local celebrities throughout the years and was of course paid for by his parents, was representing him. It was stated that Cosmo had attempted to sell this vehicle to a friend, but there was no legal evidence of exchange of that vehicle from Thomas to Cosmo. And one of the other victims, Mark Sturgis's vehicle, was also found at Peddler Village, which was about 4 miles from where the farm was located. But the Dinardo family released a statement through their attorney that day saying, "As parents, we sympathize with the parents and families of the missing young men and are cooperating in every way possible with the investigation being conducted by law enforcement." But neighbors of this farm, the Colemans, stated that they had heard gunshots around the property on Saturday, July 8th, the day after Dean, Thomas, and Mark vanished. They had heard a series of several blasts that were very loud. Susan Coleman said she was sitting outside with her husband. They heard gunshots, and they didn't think much of it because people often hunted in that area, but then they heard more gunshots, yelling, and commotion. Around this time, Dean's father contacted the investigators saying that he had just received a call from Verizon saying that one of the phones on his plan, and Dean was still on his plan, had called 911. The family thought maybe Dean was alive and calling for help. Unfortunately, he would be informed that investigators had just found his phone on that farm property, and they had called 911 dispatch to identify who that phone belonged to. Then at a midnight press conference on Thursday, July 13th, 2 weeks since the disappearances, the DA announced that remains had been found on the farm. A 12.5-foot hole had been uncovered on the property of the Dinardos. The remains had been identified as 19-year-old Dean Finocchiaro, and it was confirmed to be a homicide.
I'm Matt Weintraub, Bucks County District Attorney. I'm here to make an announcement about a significant development in the investigation that you've all been following so patiently, so diligently. We have found human remains in an approximately 12.5-foot deep common grave that we have painstakingly dug with a lot of care so as not to damage any potential evidence. And I'm very, very sad to say that we can now identify Dean Finocchiaro. There are additional human remains inside that grave. This is a homicide, make no mistake about it. Don't know how many homicides. We are yet to know the answer to that question. And I want to let you know that we reiterated over and over again, and it goes to say one more time to the families that we're strong, and we're going to remain strong, and we're going to see this investigation to the end. We're going to bring each and every one of these lost boys home to their families one way or another. We will not rest until we do that. I feel that we bought ourselves a little bit of time in charging Mr. Dinardo with the stolen car case today and getting that $5 million bail. It is my hope that he does not post that, but that's his prerogative, of course, if he can post it. But we're going to start looking seriously at the homicide charges, and in fact, we already have pursued that option. We had cadaver dogs, and I don't understand the science behind it, but those dogs could smell these poor boys 12.5 feet below the ground.
They were still working to identify other men as other remains had also been found. Thomas's grandfather told the media that he had heard the remains were found under this blue tarp after a propane tank was actually lifted out, revealing a large hole. Another press conference was held at 11 that morning, urging anyone with tips to call the FBI tip line. 6 hours later, Cosmo Dinardo's attorney announced that his client had confessed.
Mr. Dinardo this evening confessed to the district attorney. He confessed to his participation or commission in the murders of the 4 young men. In exchange for that confession, Mr. Dinardo was promised by the district attorney that he will spare his life by not invoking the death.
As Cosmo left the courthouse, shackled in his prison uniform, he said, "I'm sorry."
Cosmo, you admitted to killing 4 people. Why'd you do it? What do you have to say to these families, Cosmo? Anything to say? Even a sympathy? Even you're sorry?
I'm sorry.
Why'd you do it?
but everyone would be in for a surprise when another arrest was made. You see, Cosmo had been raised by his parents, Sandra and Anthony, wealthy cement contractors who own these multiple properties and businesses. His father's father was said to be the success of the family, and then Cosmo's father was the one who created Metro Ready Mix and Supply, which was a very successful company. His mother, Sandra, also ran a trucking company, Bella Trucking. When they got together, they built a partnership that was selling concrete and delivering it. Cosmo was said to be their oldest son. He was known to be a good kid. He was a member of the town's anti-drug alcohol task force and a captain of the football team when he was a teen. Cosmo wanted to be an orthodontist, and his father believed that he could one day be elected mayor. But he was also known by local law enforcement by the age of 14. He had more than 30 run-ins with officers over the next 4 years. However, it was said that 2015 was when everything changed. He broke up with his girlfriend. He failed to become a Navy SEAL as he had hoped. And then Cosmo was said to get into an ATV accident and his mood suddenly became dark. He began gaining weight, isolating, he was very aggressive, and nothing was helping. He was obsessed with the Mexican cartel and disturbing ritual of disposing bodies. He began treatment for bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, he was on antipsychotics, and he dropped out of uni. But it wasn't just his own doing. He was actually banned from the campus for harassing people. He allegedly made comments that unnerved several people, and his parents were sent a letter saying that their son could face trespassing charges if he ever returned to the school. And that was only a year prior to these murders. On July 14, 2017, a press conference announced that murder charges had been filed for 2 individuals regarding the missing 4 boys of Bucks County.
Frankly, been wondering exactly how to start this off, but I guess I want to just tell you how I'm feeling. I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of many, many people. I feel a lot of sadness. I feel relief. I feel so proud of my team, and I feel resolved because although we've sped through this week and we've accomplished so much, we have so much more to do to bring justice in this case. But I am very, very relieved to say that we brought 4 young men one step closer to their loved ones and so that they can rest in peace. Dean Finocchiaro, Tom Mayo, Mark Sturgis, and Jimmy Patrick have all been positively identified. We've notified all their loved ones. We're not here to make moral judgments on any of their actions, and I know many of you may have questions about that for me. We're here to accomplish 2 goals, and that was to bring these young men home to their loved ones who have done nothing wrong, have done nothing to deserve this horrible, unspeakable tragedy that has been beset upon them. And we're here to seek justice for them. As I stand here today, I have in my hand some paperwork that has now been officially filed of record, charging 2 men with the murder of those 4 young men. An agreement that I decided to make with Cosmo Dinardo. We were able to also secure Jimmy Patrick's body and bring him home as well. I rode there in a car on the same site as the other 3 men were found. It was so far away that I started getting sick to my stomach on the ride. We were able to secure the 2 weapons that we allege were used in these 4 murders so that they can never be used to hurt or kill anyone ever again. And our boys get to go home to their families, which was always our first priority.
What makes him kill these people? Why does he want to shoot them?
Jeff, I don't know that. I'm not really sure if we could ever answer that question. I'm not a forensic expert. I think if you read the probable cause affidavit, what you'll glean from it is that there was an attempt to burn the bodies, to deface them, to obliterate them, but I don't believe that that was successful. I'm satisfied at this time that based on the evidence that we have the 2 men locked up that need to be brought to justice.
Your belief is that had you not offered him the deal of no death penalty, you don't get Patrick's body?
We'd still be looking, I know that much. I can't predict the future, but that is what I believe.
They were finally able to announce that all 4 men had been identified as remains found on the 90-acre farm. Dean, Thomas, and Mark had been murdered and placed in this hole, but Jimmy had not been found in the same location as the other victims. Now, his family believed that he actually wasn't a part of these murders due to his last cell phone ping being in Delaware County instead of Bucks, but they would be informed by police that the data had been mistaken. He was actually last tracked to Bucks County and Silbury on the farm with the others. His body was located in another area, and murder weapons had also been found on the farm and collected as evidence. On the 90-acre farm, investigators had found a pile of rocks attempting to camouflage disturbed dirt. It appeared to be tilled up, and so 6 feet down, the smell of gasoline hit them. Eventually, they hit the oil tank and found a boot inside, and below that was the tarp. Human remains were underneath. 3 bodies with significant injuries as well as burns. There was an alleged attempt to burn these bodies, which was unsuccessful. Dean, Thomas, and Mark were identified. Their families were notified, but the family of Jimmy Patrick were still searching for him, and so were investigators. That's when they went to Cosmo, asking him to give up the location, and he would inform them of exactly what happened. So Cosmo then began cooperating, and he confessed that on July 5th, he met up with Jimmy Patrick as a middleman for selling drugs. He said his boss was a big-time dealer named Carlos, but that's all the information he would give. Cosmo admitted to knowing Jimmy in high school. He said that he had picked up Jimmy to purchase marijuana and asked him for the money. It was supposed to be $8,000, but Jimmy had $800, and Cosmo said that wasn't enough. So Cosmo then handed Jimmy a shotgun, saying that he would sell him the gun instead of the drugs. However, when Jimmy was inspecting the gun, Cosmo said he shot him in the back. He then got the backhoe, he said a prayer, and he threw Jimmy in the hole. He then burned Jimmy's $800, saying that he didn't want the kid's money, and he didn't kill him over the money. He wasn't robbing him. He said, "This was not going to go good for me. The guy would have shot me if I went up to meet with him and I didn't have the money." Cosmo was described as being quite calm and unsentimental as he confessed this information of murder to the police. But most of the 4 hours of the interrogation were not released publicly, as the DA's office said that was not part of public record.
Who is this?
Jimmy Tar Patrick.
Did you murder Jimmy Tar Patrick?
Yes, I did. Yes, I murdered Mark Sturgis.
And who's this?
I murdered Tom Mayo. You guys are digging right here.
Yep.
There's 3 bodies there.
Okay.
The 4th one is right there.
You were selling drugs, right?
I was middlemaning deals with drugs. This particular deal, I was not making any money. I was just, getting him a good price on a large quantity of marijuana. We get out of the truck, I hand him a shotgun. He goes to shoot it, and I shoot him. And I did not want to get killed for his stupid ass mistake.
But the night prior to the murder charges of 2 different men, one being Cosmo, police went to the northeast on Maggie Avenue, and another 20-year-old was taken into custody. This was a man named Sean Kratz, who is believed to be an accomplice in these murders. Cosmo Dinardo faced 4 counts of criminal homicide, abuse of a corpse, robbery, inflicted injury, and possession of a weapon. Sean Kratz faced 3 counts of criminal homicide, of a corpse, robbery, inflicted injury, and possession of a weapon. Both were being denied bail. You see, Cosmo had confessed that with 3 of the murders, his cousin, Sean Kratz, had been his accomplice. Every drug deal appeared to be an ambush. Cosmo admitted that he got ready the 7th with Dean. First, he went to the grocery store. He bought $300 worth of steaks and fish for his family. And with his groceries, he drove to his cousin Sean Kratz's home, and they went to his grandmother's to deliver the food. Cosmo said that he and his cousin were not very close. They had just started hanging out a few months prior, and Cosmo didn't even know what last name Sean used at that point. So the cousins then were still together. They went on to meet Dean, and they were giving him a quarter pound of weed that he was requesting. However, Cosmo said he only had 2 ounces to give him. So Cosmo said that their plan was to rob Dean and shoot him, and he admitted to killing Dean, saying his head was split the hell open. Half his brain was in the barn. He said he covered Dean's body with a tarp after taking everything out of his pockets. This included a wad of cash, a phone, and an ID. And then they rolled him into the backhoe and lifted him into the pig roaster just outside the barn.
So I go to meet up with Dean. Show him I was gonna, rob him in the woods. by himself on a quad and kill him. He didn't. Dean turns around to go walk out. When I went to turn, I just hear a bunch of shots go off. Dean goes down, face down, dead. Okay. I took the gun from Sean and I shoot Dean, I think once or twice. I don't know how many times I shot him.
Why was he not dead?
No, he was dead.
Okay.
But I just to finish, I just shot him. I'm not lying, he was dead.
While Cosmo was practically emotionless during interrogation, when Sean Kratz, the accomplice, was brought in for questioning, his voice cracked as he told his version of events. Sean spoke about the murder of Dean, and he said, "I wanted to go home, but Cosmo made it clear that he wasn't taking me home." He claimed that Cosmo wanted him to take Dean and rob him in the woods and shoot him and then take the money, but he hesitated. He just couldn't do it. So they then took Dean to the farm, and they all jumped on four-wheelers. They were following dirt trails in the woods, and Sean was to shoot Dean at this point, but he still couldn't do it. So he said Cosmo got angry and led them all into a barn under the pretense of checking for a Vespa, to see if there was a Vespa there. Sean said he got nervous. He lit a cigarette. Dean was fiddling with his phone. So they were all inside, and Sean said that Cosmo then gave him a hand gesture, and so Sean closed his eyes and shot at Dean. Dean fell to the ground. Cosmo then took the gun and shot him again for good measure. Sean said that he rushed out of the barn and vomited, and Cosmo laughed at him. While Cosmo was cleaning up the crime scene, Sean stated that Cosmo's father suddenly drove onto this property. Cosmo would go out to see him and witnessed a woman in the passenger seat of the vehicle, but this wasn't his mother. As Cosmo's father saw Cosmo, he backed away from the property, not saying anything. Sean said that Cosmo was bent out of shape about this other woman and swore to kill them. Cosmo stated that on that same day, July 7th, he also had plans to meet with Thomas. Again, this was not meant to be a simple drug deal. Cosmo had this other idea to rob him and then let him go. However, Mark was not expected to be there. Cosmo was not expecting the two of them. And Thomas and Mark had no idea that there were already two dead bodies on this property. Cosmo would shoot Thomas in the back, and he instantly crumpled in the gravel driveway. He was paralyzed on the ground. He was screaming that he couldn't feel his legs. Cosmo said that Mark started running as soon as the shooting began, and he made it about 20 feet before Cosmo sprayed him with bullets from his silver revolver. He said he was flustered by Thomas's screaming, and he jumped on his father's backhoe. He turned the backhoe in the direction of Thomas, and then the screams stopped as he admitted to rolling over Thomas, and he died instantly.
They could sense something's not right. So when they turn their backs on me, I shoot Tom in the back, drop him. Mark's like, "What the?" He was such a big kid. I unloaded the gun on him. He's screaming, going crazy. Sean's like, got his head in his hands. I grab the backhoe. He sees that coming, just shuts the fuck up, and I just run him over.
Thomas and Mark's bodies were placed inside the pig roaster with Dean's body, and Cosmo confessed that the last three men's bodies were doused with gasoline, and he burned them in that pig roaster. Cosmo then used a blowtorch to burn the victims' phones and Thomas's car registration. He then drove to a gas station, purchased a root beer, cream soda, water, iced tea, and cigarettes, and he went back to the farm to pick up Sean, and together they drove back to the Dinardo family home. Cosmo actually admitted that they stopped for cheesesteaks, and he couldn't eat his because he just did something so gruesome he didn't have an appetite. But after an hour of interrogation, Cosmo finally began to show emotions. He began to sob as he said,
"I don't know why I did this shit, man. Threw my life away for nothing. My life's done."
Sean was said to stay over at the Dinardo family home that night, and the next morning they went back to clean up their crime scene. They actually washed Cosmo's truck and drove to Sean's mother's home, and that is when they made the whole day tampering with evidence while also having family time. They went to Sean's sister's to see her new baby. Then they went to Sean's uncle's barbershop to get a haircut and a shave. And then they went to get Cosmo's truck professionally washed. But Sean would tell investigators that prior to their arrest, Cosmo's mother appeared to know what her son had done. Cosmo got a call from his mother after the murders, and she was hysterical. She met them. She was already sobbing. She said that she heard that Dean was missing and that her son was the last person to see him. Cosmo told her that he didn't know anything about it. And his mother said that everyone was always trying to push everything on him. But after that encounter, Cosmo rushed back to the farm to get rid of the bodies. Sean said he wanted to go home, but Cosmo still didn't let him. So they went back to the farm to bury the 3 men. They then grabbed the murder weapons and took them to Sean's mother's home. But Sean confessed to going back to his mom's home to remove the guns. When asked why he did that, he said the same reason I shot Dean. I was scared Dinardo was going to harm not only myself, but I have a 1.5-month-old nephew, got a little brother, a mother. He made it out like you say anything and I'll hurt you. After knowing what he's capable of, I was scared for others. Now, Sean had a criminal record and was arrested for burglary charges in June and December of 2016. The year prior, he was stealing tools, clothes, jewelry. He pleaded guilty to retail theft, but he actually skipped bail, and a warrant was out for his arrest. So he was out on bail when these 3 men were killed. So Cosmo was confessing to all 4 of the murders, but his mother Sandra said that he was a model son before the onset of mental illness. But one of the murder weapons belonged to Sandra. However, another shocking twist would come when on July 18th, Police Commissioner Richard Ross would announce that they also wanted to talk to Cosmo Dinardo about other murders. They suspected that these 4 men were not the only ones that he had killed. He had actually confessed to the Bucks County Lost Boys murder, but also to killing a woman in a basement and killing another man.
Anytime we hear an allegation of that magnitude, we have a responsibility to investigate it, if it has any validity to it, and then we'll pass it on if it has any nexus to any other jurisdiction, see where it goes.
However, I was not able to find more about the investigation into these murders. And on May 16th of 2018, Cosmo Dinardo pleaded guilty to the murders of the 4 men and was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences. Sean had also planned to plead guilty to avoid the death penalty, but he actually broke this agreement after Cosmo's sentencing. He would go to trial. He denied his part in Dean's murder. However, the confession was played for the court of him saying he was involved. And Thomas's uncle was saying that Sean could have been a hero if he drove Dean right off the farm. And if he had done that, Tom, Mark, and Dean would still be alive today. So on November 18th, 2019, Sean Kratz, who was then 22 years old, was sentenced to life without parole plus a consecutive 18 to 36 years for the first-degree murder of Dean and the voluntary manslaughter of Mark and Thomas. 5 years after the murders in 2023, relatives of the 4 men murdered filed a wrongful death case against the family of the Dinardos. This alleged negligence by Cosmo's parents, who provided him access to ATVs, construction equipment, despite his past behavior. The lawsuit stated that they provided their son a playland for illegal acts. This was finally settled. Now, no motive has ever been determined in these murders. Why do you think he went on a killing spree? Had he killed prior to this? Was he doing it simply for the fun of it? Did he mean to kill Jimmy? Or was that an accident and then he just kept going with it and decided to act like this crazy killer and continue with the 3 other men? Was this man just not in his right mind, and that is why this occurred? Do you think Sean has a bigger part of these murders, or was he really just the accomplice that was drug around by his cousin and didn't want to be involved in any of this? I can't imagine what these 4 men were thinking as they were attacked when they believed that this was just going to be a simple exchange. I don't think it's fair to ever place the blame on the victim, even if they were going to buy these drugs. They did not deserve to be killed, especially in the horrific ways that Cosmo explained that he murdered them. It shocked me at every single turn. And if you know more or can find more about those murders that Cosmo allegedly confessed to with the woman in the basement and then other man, I would love to hear in the comments below, because that is insane that he confessed to more. And we just don't know what happened with those cases. But thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry for my voice. I have been sick for the past week, which is why I missed last week's episode. I'm so sorry. I hope it wasn't too annoying. I tried my best, but thank you so much for watching. Please make sure that you are subscribed. Go ahead and watch the last video that I posted. That is about baby Amaya and the fact that she still has not been located, even though it's believed that she was murdered by her stepfather. And possibly her mother. Her belongings were found in a hotel dumpster, but she was not there. So we are still asking the question, where is baby Maya? And it's an important one to ask. And I really hope that she is found one day. So I will link that down below if you have not watched that yet. But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough. And I love you to absolute pieces. Okay.